Let's touch on this Baldur's Gate thing real quick. IGN did a collection of some of the statements made by some of these developers. Let's look at it and see what we're dealing with in this regard. Let's see what the drama is.
Baldur's Gate 3 is taking the internet by storm. At its peak, a whopping 800,000 plus concurrent players were playing this weekend, catapulting it to the number 8 most played of all time spot.
Which, just think about that for a second. Number 8 of all time on PC. That is ridiculous. Like when Hogwarts Legacy did that earlier this year, everybody was talking about it because that's insane. Like that's bafflingly crazy. And Hogwarts Legacy, I mean, I think it's even more impressive because Hogwarts Legacy did that on PC and it had an outstanding launch on consoles as well. Like on PlayStation 5, I don't even know how many copies they must have sold over there. Xbox, I think they sold a lot as well. And then they're bringing it, they just brought it to PS4 and Xbox One, and then they're going to be bringing it to the Switch eventually, I suppose. So Hogwarts Legacy, I'm sure is just like printing everybody money at this point. But Baldur's Gate 3 having launched on only PC at this point, breaking those records, getting all of the hype from that, and later launching on PS5 and the next year launching on Xbox, it's just going to keep dominating the headlines. And as people get further and further into the game, they're only getting more passionate about talking about it. That's what's crazy to me. It's like, normally these games come out, people play it for a weekend, and then they kind of finish it, and the hype calms down, and people move on. With this, people are just getting more and more into it as time goes on. It's wild. It's wild. Yeah, Rocky, it's also one of the highest rated games of all time. Yeah, it's up there with like Tears of the Kingdom right now. It's in like the 96, 97, 98 Metacritic score range. It's wild. It's insane. Epic, give it Game of the Year next year too. Dude, for real. It's crazy how good this game is. I'm baffled away. I just was talking to a friend of mine and he's like, yeah, I just spent 50 hours. I thought I was at the end of the game. Turns out I'm just at the end of Act 1. There's like 3, like you're not close, dude. You're not close at all. It's, if you really take your time, and especially if you're playing on a harder difficulty where you got to really try in combat, easily this game is going to give you 120 to 150 hours of gameplay. If you're clipping along at a good pace, you probably get through it in like 100, but still, dude. And that's for one playthrough. And you just think of how many variations are possible. Like, oh, did you side with the goblins in the beginning? No? Well, you can, and it will be totally different. Totally different. It's wild. It's absolutely crazy. Cannot recommend the game enough. Oh, baby. I think at this point, it's my game of the year. Unless Spider-Man, like, straight up gives you a back rub and a sloppy bit of encouragement. I don't know what else could take it. I really don't know. I don't expect Starfield to be unanimously praised like this one is. Just because, like, Bethesda, except for Skyrim, has always had kind of good reactions, but not overwhelmingly insanely positive reactions to their game. So sloppy encouragement. Yeah. So I just don't expect anything to really come and steal it away. Armored Core, I think, is going to be popular with its core fan base, but I don't think it's going to get anywhere near as big as Baldur's Gate 3. Maybe I'm surprised. I guess some people were maybe saying that about Elden Ring, but I feel like Elden Ring hype was way higher than Armored Core hype is right now.
The gaming community has sung its praises, and it's incredibly refreshing to play a feature-complete game of this caliber on day one. But AAA game developers want you to know that this is rockstar level nonsense for scope, that it's foolhardy to set expectations higher.
Which, let's just, hold on, let's take these one at a time. Let's just take these one at a time. We looked at this one before. I would not be surprised if this was more dev effort than the next 2 or 3 games in the genre combined. It's rockstar level nonsense for scope. It's so funny to call something nonsense. Like, yeah, the scope is crazy, it's doing a lot, and it's nonsense. Like, I guess maybe he's just throwing words out. But, like, even if you made a game that's just Act 1 of Baldur's Gate 3, with this level of variation and player agency, I think people would be very, very happy paying 60, 70 bucks for it. The game is that huge that like I think they'd be fine with it. So we're not asking to do full on Baldur's Gate 3 every single time. I understand that maybe that's not feasible, but I do think it's fair to expect, in terms of the package that's being delivered, something on a smaller scope but with the same quality. I think the bar being raised to that point isn't that scandalous. This is a great thread about why using a singular game to set expectations for everyone developing titles in a genre isn't useful and is instead foolhardy. And I believe we read through this on stream as well. Like a lot of people, I'm deeply excited about what the lovely folks at Larian accomplished with Baldur's Gate 3, but I want to gently, preemptively push back against players trying to take the excitement and using it to apply criticism of raised standards to RPGs going forward. I just think, like, I understand what a lot of these devs are saying. They're trying to be like, listen, we don't hold everybody to the standard of Rockstar, because not every company can spend 5-6 years with 3,000 to 4,000 developers and hundreds of millions of dollars producing a game. So it's not fair to hold everybody to that same standard. I can understand why they would say that, because budgets are different, timelines are different, workforces are different, but it doesn't change the fact that, like, once we've tasted the forbidden fruit of a better game than X, once we've tried Y and Y is way better than X, you can't untaste it. You can't unring the bell. You can't. It's been rung. You got to just deal with it. So, love it or hate it, the bar has been raised, and I think we're all very excited about it because we get, hopefully, better games as a result. But this is, Anyway.
The first response to defend the current state of AAA gaming as...
Yeah, you can't unbake a cake. You can't... I was like trying to think of another example. I was like, you can't unmilk a cow. I'll see myself out.
Opposed to saying, hey, maybe we can learn a thing or two from Baldur's Gate 3 and make our game better for our customers. This all kicked off way back on July 8th, a lifetime ago by internet standards, I know, when a writer and BAFTA nominee, Xavier Nelson, took to Twitter to express concerns about Baldur's Gate 3, namely that fans would use Baldur's Gate 3 to apply criticism or a raised standard to RPGs going forward. My rebuttal is, why shouldn't
Yeah, Hassan moment. Yes, Rocky, I do also have this story pulled up. We'll look at this next.
Customers have raised standards? Taking it a step further, why shouldn't some AAA developers raise their own standards? Are we really going to pretend that consumers shouldn't be a little upset right now and hoping for an improvement in the industry going forward? Rockstar just announced a $50 conversion of the original Red Dead Redemption for the PlayStation 4 and Switch that has no mention of a 4K update, no mention of 60 FPS, and no mention of multiplayer support. The game came out 13 years ago, and the Xbox port does everything they're offering, and then some for free with your 360 copy.
Which is so freaking funny. What a dub for Xbox that they just already support all this. So much so, to such a crazy extent, that Rockstar doesn't even bother bringing this new conversion to the Xbox. Because they know if they were to do that everybody would just buy the old copy because there's no reason to play it. It's no different. Like, this whole thing was just insane. And I hope, please, everybody, please, I hope people don't buy the damn thing. Please don't. Please don't. I know that there's going to be some people who are like, well, I just want to play Red Dead, so I'll just buy it so I can play it on my PS5 through backwards compatibility. I just have one hair. Where is that hair? What is... Just hanging out. Just don't. Just don't. That's my message. Don't buy it. Wait for it to drop on sale because it probably will.
Go buy a brand new copy of the Game of the Year edition on Amazon right now for $30 and you're good to go. Star Wars Jedi Survivor, when released on PC, had furious fans citing numerous problems getting the game to run, frequent crashes, and similar problems on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox.
Yes, it's boggling my mind that nowadays, like, I posted a video where offhandedly I made like a mention to how broken Jedi Survivor was. And I got like a flood of comments from people who were like, actually, the game ran fine for me. So I don't know what you're talking about. Like, dude, this isn't even controversial. We all know that it was broken at launch. Even on consoles, it did not run anywhere near as well as it should have. But I guess if we're just making stuff up, if we're just saying stuff, whatever.
EA apologized and is still working to fix the issues.
Yeah, to be clear, it's still pretty bad. I popped in it like a few days ago just to see what it was like. It's still pretty bad. Console performance is still terrible. What they need to do is they need to just go in there and turn off the ray tracing stuff that they're doing on console. It's insane that they have it running there at all. They shouldn't, but they need to turn that off completely, and then they need to figure out whatever the hell is happening with PC frame times, because they're just terrible.
Destiny 2 just released a State of the Game blog saying, amongst other things, that they don't have the resources to release new ritual armor every season. But that same studio manages to create new armor sets in the shop for up to $20 a pop without fail every season. Diablo 4 on...
Yeah, shocker. We just don't have the resources, guys. Also, like, maybe this is just me not being familiar with game dev. It seems to me that armor is like really easy to make for a new season. Am I crazy? It seems to be the case that armor would be like one of the easiest things to do for a seasonal update, but I guess they're just saying they can't do it. Somebody who understands Destiny, help me understand that. Is there something I'm missing?
Unabashedly has several character skins priced at $20 each and just released their first season that had a patch that was so poorly thought out that the developers had to have an emergency live stream to apologize, and have since begun working to revert those changes.
Yeah, this whole thing, like, we talked about this on stream as well. I was trying to figure out if it was maybe like part of some grand plan for them to adjust stuff to then sell you the fix to it, or this or that. I think at this point, it's pretty clear they just really didn't think it through. They just thought, oh, well, we're just going to rip the Band-Aid off and try to balance everything. And then I guess these guys maybe didn't actually check the exact numbers on what they were nerfing and just destroying in the patch. It's really bizarre to me, but like they screwed this up bad, man. This will go down in history as one of the most bizarre patches to a live service game ever, because it just didn't make any sense. There wasn't even like a fix to anything. It was just they broke everything all at the same time. It was really, really weird. That's just become more and more clear. When I first saw it, when we were looking at it on stream that day, I was like, I don't really understand this. Am I like missing something? Are they fixing stuff with these adjustments? And then as we watched more stuff, as we read up on it more, it's just clear, nope, this doesn't fix anything. It just breaks everything. It just makes the game objectively worse. Like that. Who knows what they were doing? I just don't know. Looks like Justin Bieber at 40 years old in the middle. Dude, kinda. Baby, baby, baby. Oh, baby. You're right. They basically told us, since we don't go for the ritual armor, which looks horrible compared to the store armors, they're done making them instead of making them better. Oh, lovely. Yeah, I gotta love Destiny 2. I don't know much about Destiny 2, other than that people are very upset. Hardcore, like people who play Destiny 2 are not super happy right now. Everything goes back to Fortnite, right? Everything goes back to
Just
Fortnite.
released.
This is all just Fortnite's fault, frankly. Like Fortnite made this normal, made paying 2,300 in-game coins or whatever for this normal. Because on Fortnite, people will pay $20 for a skin. And it's really not that crazy or scandalous. It's just the normal, unfortunately now, for live service games to charge $20 for a skin. And the thing is, and this is where like it sort of sounds like victim blaming, but like the reason they do this is because people buy it. People pay that 2,300 in-game coins or whatever, and they will pay for the nicer skin. They will do it. And the thing is, like, for some players, especially people who play one game for months and months on end, they're okay paying $70 for the game, and then once a month paying $20 for a new skin. They have no problem with that. And it makes sense. They're probably, honestly, on their gaming hobby, they're probably spending less than somebody like me is spending when I buy a new game every month. So they're spending less overall, But they're buying stuff like this. They're buying skins and they're buying cosmetics that keep the game fresh and interesting for them. And so I'm like, yeah, I think it's ridiculous that we're paying 23 human American dollars for a skin in a game that has already released and is now not that good. But people are still buying it, which is why they do it. If everybody stopped buying it, they'd probably patch it all out. We saw that with Shadow of War. With Shadow of War, the backlash to the monetization was so bad that they eventually just patched all of it out. I'm working on a video on that. Like, they patched out all of the monetization because people hated it so badly. Same with like Battlefront 2. Battlefront 2 also filled with loot boxes. They did the like star card thing. And so you'd pay for card packs that have like actual in-game affecting stats to them. And then you would apply those to characters and everything. Honestly, it makes it so playing the game now, if you don't have star cards, it's totally unplayable because it'll just get curb stomped by all of these other players that have full star cards kitted out, where they just have huge gameplay advantages against you. It's like really toxic and not very fun. But all of that said, they at least removed buying those loot boxes and loot cards, or whatever you'd call them, card packs, I guess, out of the game just because the response was so bad. So if people stopped buying this stuff, they would adjust. They would find something else to do, but people still buy it, and that's why they keep doing it. And there's no easy way to like talk about it without it just sounding like you're victim blaming and being like, yeah, it's the company's bad, but you guys are worse for buying it. Nobody really cares about that. We would just like the company to stop. But the best way to make the company stop doing it is to just stop freaking buying it. And you know the best way to do that, the best way to compel behavior, I think we saw this with like Flat Earth is a great example. Tease the shit out of people. That's all you gotta do. That's all you gotta do. If you see somebody running with a $23 skin in the game, you just tease the crap out of them. And eventually it'll be so socially taboo to buy these things that people will stop, and then the market will adjust and everything will be okay. But the key to doing it is to just be like, really, bro, you bought the thing? It's like, it's the same thing where like Twitter just announced, or I guess X now, they announced that they're going to give people the ability to hide their blue check mark if they're subscribed to Twitter Blue, because they had so many people getting teased about it that they were canceling their memberships. So they gave them the ability to get the perks of it, but to hide that they had actually paid for it, which is just really, really funny. Anyway, all of that to say, just stop buying the damn things.
Skins priced at $20 each, and just released their first season that had a patch that was so poorly thought out that the developers had to have an emergency live stream to apologize, and have since begun working to revert those changes.
We don't plan on doing a patch like this ever again.
Okay, you need a more
Shocker.
comparable RPG example of why fans are heralding Baldur's Gate 3 as a breath of fresh air?
Assassin's Creed Valhalla? No.
Look no further than Mass Effect Andromeda, which was widely panned.
Sorry, my face is tired.
Yeah. Oh, dude, this quote was really weird. The dialogue and the subtitles said, "My face is tired from dealing with everything." And this happens in the first like 45 minutes of the game. And then afterwards, they said that it's actually supposed to say, my faith is tired from dealing with all of this. But that doesn't even really make any sense. The line still doesn't make sense. It's just a weird line delivered by a weird alien monster creature.
From dealing with everything.
Or Cyberpunk 2077 that made promises about last-gen game consoles that it couldn't keep. It took CDPR almost a year to get that all sorted out. I'll make this as clear as possible to contextualize how fans are feeling. It feels like money has become more important than the core experience for fans. That's why Elden Ring, Baldur's Gate 3, and even The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom are being widely celebrated. So what is up with the excuses? A game came along that is amazing, is selling well, is being praised by developers and fans alike, and the response is, well, we can't do that. Well, sweet. If that doesn't get me hyped for Mass Effect 4, I don't know what will. Xavier's tweet was well-intentioned, and he went on to add a lot of important context, but I think it misses the perspective of the consumer. We don't know anything about game design or how hard it is. We just know that Destiny is deleting hundreds of dollars worth of expansions when they feel like it, that Diablo is constantly reminding us to buy skins in their store, and most PC ports have been abysmal lately.
This straight up is fake news. I'm just going to be real with you guys. This screenshot is fake news. This was taken from us, like it was somebody playing on, I believe, a Radeon graphics card, which had a couple of bugs associated with it, but they didn't have drivers updated. So that was a chunk of this. And they set it to like below Steam Deck settings. So it was set to just egregiously horrible graphical settings, and it made it look like this. This was like something that went viral at the time. I remember digging into it and finding that it was just kind of like, basically when you're trying to make something look terrible, you can make it look like this, but it's not actually representative. It's not like somebody was running this on a 3080 or a 4090 or anything and it looked like that. This was somebody trying to make it look terrible. So a little bit of fake news correction. But I think, like I've said this before, a lot of the time in public discourse, perception is more important than reality. And all that really means, it's not saying that like the truth doesn't matter. It's not saying any of that. What it means is that in the context of public discourse, what everybody kind of settles on and agrees is real is what you have to deal with. You just have to deal with it. If everybody has the perception that PlayStation has the best like single player narrative games, even if that's not objectively true, even if we could pull up an Excel spreadsheet and show the stats and be like, no, it's actually on PC. They have quantitatively more than PlayStation. If the perception is that PlayStation has all of those, that's what you have to deal with. If you are a company like Xbox trying to change that perception, trying to take that mantle for yourself, you have to change that perception, even though it's not factually true, and you have to adjust it and address that one specifically. And in this case, everybody has the perception that big AAA development is only focused on rushing games out that are not ready, on sort of lazy, huge, sort of Ubisoft-esque open world games that don't do anything really interesting. It's just very generic. And people are lacking games that really focus on the player experience first and foremost. Even if that's not objectively true, which in this case, I think it's more likely true than not. But even if it's not objectively true, it just is what you have to deal with. And these companies have to address it. And that's why Larian coming out and being like, yeah, we're going to release the PC port a full month early because we're ahead of schedule. That's so refreshing. It's like, wow, okay. And then it launches pretty damn polished. Okay, interesting. Wow, love that. And then we see, oh, and it's not filled with tons of like in-game shops or skins or expansions and DLC on day one. Like, oh, it's just a complete game, complete package. That's tremendous. Wow, okay. And the game is also massive. And it's priced, I believe, at 60. It's not even 70. It's priced at $60. So it's considered a budget game, which is ridiculous. And every little bitty thing they're doing wins the favor from the fans because it bucks the trend and it fights the perception, which again, whether true or not, the perception is that big AAA games can't do this kind of thing. And this game comes along and shows, no, they can, they just don't want to. And yes, it's more nuanced, it's more complicated. Some of these other big games, you know, they have a lot bigger budgets. They have to find some way to recoup that. They do that through in-game stores. And it's just too big of a risk to try to release a game and just put nothing monetizable in it and just hope it sells enough copies day one to justify the expense of the entire game's production. But again, it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because the perception is that if Larian can do it, those other companies can too, and they're choosing not to.
Remember, that tweet was made nearly a month before Baldur's Gate 3 blew up, and it was still contentious with fans speaking up about their frustrations and developers chiming in to say what felt like game development is hard, you don't get it, be quiet. Baldur's Gate 3 is a game from a large, passionate studio that refuses to add microtransactions.
Yeah, dude, they're so snarky in their notes too. I love it. No, there are no in-game purchases in our game. We believe in providing a complete and immersive gaming experience without the need for additional purchases. Enjoy the game to its fullest without any additional costs or microtransactions. You know what this reminds me of? Larian's approach to all of this? It reminds me a hell of a lot of CDPR's approach to The Witcher 3. Remember when they just were winning just dub after dub after dub after dub with free DLC expansions, and then they did like all this other stuff that got people so excited for Cyberpunk when we eventually would get that. They were just like, they identified what the market wanted, what hardcore gamers wanted, and they gave it to them, and people loved them for it. And then they kind of burned most of that goodwill with Cyberpunk 2077, which hopefully Larian doesn't do with whatever's coming next. But it certainly is very reminiscent of that. Very, very reminiscent. And it's just more, it's really surprising to me that more studios don't just try to give people what they want. You know, like, it's just amazing. I hate to say it, but watch Larian fumble the next game. The thing is, like, it reminds me of what Jeff Bezos said when he was asked by an interviewer, do you think Amazon is ever going to collapse and shut down? Do you think Amazon is ever going to die as a company? And Jeff Bezos, the founder, and at the time he was the CEO, he said, oh, of course. Amazon is going to die. I just hope it dies after I'm gone so I don't have to see it. Like, every company eventually screws up massively. Doesn't matter how big you are, how beloved you are. The East India Trading Company at one point employed 1/3 of the globe. The East India Trading Company was way bigger than Amazon, way bigger than Walmart or Microsoft. Like, you're talking about a company that basically ran the planet for a good long while. And even they went belly up eventually. So it doesn't matter how successful or how beloved a company is or how huge they are, how many resources they have. Eventually they screw up and eventually they'll die out. And so Larian, I'm sure at some point, is also going to fumble. They're also going to screw up. As we saw, like, I remember making a video way back. It was probably like 2016, 2017 or something. But I remember saying, after like Fallout 4, we saw Bethesda kind of stumble a little bit. And we got Mass Effect Andromeda, and then they stumbled a little bit. And that coming from BioWare, it was unthinkable that BioWare would collapse in the way that they did. I mean, you're talking about a studio that made Game of the Year in 2014 with Dragon Age Inquisition. And within just, what, 6 years? When did Anthem drop? Was that 2019, maybe? But anyway, you're talking within like 6 years. They go from Game of the Year winners to mocked and ridiculed in the industry for having 2 horrible releases in a row. Just think about that. Think about that time period. That's the same, like, that's less time than between Fallout 4 and Starfield. And they went from being Game of the Year, one of the top RPG developers in the industry, to globally mocked and ridiculed for screwing up 2 massive games. So it can happen quick. Never think that you're immune. Like, the danger is when companies start to think they're immune, think that they're above it all, then they screw up. That's why I'm a little cautious now with all the GTA stuff, seeing what they're doing with Red Dead 1, the conversion. I just am cautious because anybody can screw it up. Even like Rockstar Games could screw up. It's unlikely, but it was also unlikely that CDPR screwed up The Witcher 3 or the Cyberpunk 2077 so much after The Witcher 3. That was very, very unlikely, but they did it. They still screwed it up. So you just have to be, cautious because anything's possible. You reckon Rockstar is going to screw up hard? I don't know. I just think like they've for years and years been making consistent decisions that are bafflingly stupid. And for any other company, that would be a major red flag for future releases. If they just got really greedy, if they got super toxic for years and years, that for me would be a big red flag that maybe their next game is going to suffer from those same types of decisions. And Rockstar gets a pass because they tend to put out some of the most incredible games of all time consistently. But that might eventually change. I hope it's not with Grand Theft Auto 6. I really do. I'm sure it's going to be graphically and technologically very, very impressive. But I would be buckled up for some crazy stuff in there. Because Rockstar is very different than it was back in 2013. And it's a lot different now than it even was back in Red Dead Redemption 2 times 5 years ago. And since just 5 years ago, they have obliterated and totally botched the launch of an online game, Red Dead Online. Totally botched it. Died. Gone. Buried. It's over. So I'm cautiously optimistic about GTA 6, of course, but I don't want to fall into the trap that often happens when really successful companies get people really hyped, and then we get blown away by some big oopsies. So anyway, so kind of beside the point.
Gave players early access so they could address any problems that arose before launch, and is taking Steam charts by storm. So why should fans not use that as a gold standard of how to do it right? And why would a AAA studio not look at it and say, hey, maybe cramming microtransactions into our game isn't a good look? When Mass Effect 4 comes out, I don't want to see a $20 Liara skin, and I hope that its performance is tested across all platforms before release. Am I in the wrong for not wanting microtransactions and a stable video game at launch? Credit where credit's due now. There have been some really good examples of AAA games like the Dead Space remake and the Resident Evil 4 remake come to mind, both of which have been massive successes for EA and Capcom. Vampire Survivors came along and took the internet by storm last year. Do I need to bring up Elden Ring again? But that tweet blew up in the development sphere, and frankly, the pushback is just ridiculous. Developers should be looking at what Baldur's Gate 3 did and trying to replicate where they can, not jumping up to defend games that are cramming in practices that fans are getting fed up with. And make no mistake about it, these decisions impact game design. Many games are utilizing battle passes and player engagement as a metric of success.
I also think it's just, you have to be careful of what type of game we're describing. Like, Baldur's Gate 3 is in a unique niche because it's a single player narrative game, but it also has cooperative stuff in it as well. But it's easy to just compare two games that launch within a few months of each other, and they're both top down kind of RPG, action RPG type of games. But Diablo 4 and Baldur's Gate 3 are trying to do two very, very different things. Like, very, very different things. And they're trying to also hold players for very different periods of time. Baldur's Gate 3, like the CEO of Larian, he even said, no, we fully expect for people to play our game, get through like Act 1, and then probably need to take a break for a few weeks and then come back and continue playing through it. It's like, we totally understand that. It's a massive game. Take your time, whatever. For Diablo 4, they can't have that. They need you playing that game for months and months. It needs to be your weekend binge game. It needs to be the game you play when you get back from work. They need you in that game all the time. So they're trying to do two very, very different things. And I think that's important to establish, because like comparing Baldur's Gate 3 and Call of Duty is, of course, kind of a silly comparison. They're not targeted at anywhere near the same players. They're not targeted towards the same ends. Like, it's just very, very different. And so, of course, one's going to have a battle pass, one isn't. I don't even know how you would implement a battle pass into something like Baldur's Gate 3. But I think it's just, the broader point being made here is that people would prefer single player games exist and be fully polished and refined. And also people are okay if there's co-op and stuff. But like, people are just kind of sick of every game starting to feel like one of those online games that have the battle passes, even if they don't have a full-fledged battle pass. Like, they're just sick of it. They're just sick of it.
For a player, that means more grindy missions. That means more reminders to stop in the shop. It means a boring grind, because keeping players engaged is a key metric. Many of the people who came out to talk about why Baldur's Gate 3 shouldn't be the new standard have since walked back those statements, and I'm glad, because if the industry can't take a good hard look at what's going wrong, why fans reacted the way they did to Elden Ring and Baldur's Gate 3, and then make impactful changes, we're screwed. Also, People seem to be using the fact that Larian is a big studio against them, the fact that they had a long development cycle against them. Really? Blizzard is also a huge studio with over 8,500 employees across several offices. They credited every employee at Blizzard in the release of Diablo 4. Bungie is a huge studio with over 1,552 employees across several offices. BioWare is a huge studio with over 500 employees across several offices. And
Still? I would have expected them to have been downsized a lot. I don't know.
Larian is also a large studio with over 400 employees across several offices. All of them have established beloved IPs with a ton of lore to pull from. All of them have a lot of money to make video games. And all of them had a long time to make anything they wanted to make. To say Baldur's Gate 3 is successful because it's aligned with
Geek Pride. Oh, God, that's funny.
Dungeons and Dragons is insanity. You think 800,000 Steam players are playing a game called Baldur's Gate 3 because of Dungeons and Dragons? No, it's clearly gone far beyond that audience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's because of the game. The game is the reason people are obsessed with it. Like, it's because, and the biggest piece of it, I think, is the word of mouth. The word of mouth has been outrageously huge for Baldur's Gate's success. So I don't think you can beat around the bush. That's clearly a huge part of this puzzle. Proto, the one and only Proto in chat. The cynic in me thinks that Larian is taking the CDPR route. I feel like Baldur's Gate 3 is primarily propped up more by the goodwill right now, rather than the game being amazing itself. What do you think, Luke? I think, I mean, the goodwill certainly helps it. And while I understand that, like, it starts to feel like it's too good to be true, and I'm proud of you for looking at things very skeptically, and being cautious with this stuff. I would say at this point, the only evidence and information we have is what's before us, and that is that Baldur's Gate 3 is a big, expansive, very high quality game. It is being put out by a studio that's not trying to nickel and dime their players. It's feature complete, and it's I mean, I just all told, it's just a complete package that's really high quality and that people are really enjoying. Yes, the studio is also doing things that are very pro-consumer, and they seem to be leaning into that a lot. But when we look at all those pieces, it's like, so they're just like a good studio that put out a good game and they're treating players well. Like, the conclusion is just that it's a game worth supporting, and that it's just a complete package from a good studio. I have no reason to think at this point that there's any maniacal plans. And hell, I mean, even if there is something at the core, it's more like if the CEO is sitting at the table and just says, hey guys, we're just going to be super pro consumer because CDPR got a ton of success from that. It'll win goodwill with our players. It's going to work really well for us compared to being really toxic and terrible. Like, I don't care what the reason is. Maybe they like secretly would love to do a battle pass, or maybe they were going to do a battle pass, but they chose not to because they thought that this would be the better strategy. I don't really care. The end result is the same. The end result is that they're treating their players really well and not being toxic with it. And so I'm down. I'm fine. So yeah, at the end of the day, I just don't think it matters too much. BioWare used to have over 800 employees when Montreal still existed. Montreal wasn't around for long anyways. Okay, so they did get downsized after those games. Okay. Yeah, but does that make a game deserve to be rated higher than Tears of the Kingdom or top rated of all time? Is it deserving to be 96 plus on Metacritic? The thing is, and this is something just key to understand about game reviews, is that the game reviews are reviewed by people, or the games are reviewed by people who like those types of games. They're not going to assign somebody who only plays Mario Kart to review Mortal Kombat. It just wouldn't make sense. So they assign Mortal Kombat fans to review Mortal Kombat games, and they assign Mario Kart fans to play and review Mario Kart games. So they're assigning people to these games that already kind of like and enjoyed that genre and are familiar with it. And then they review it from the perspective of somebody that's familiar with that genre and likes it to begin with. So if you aren't into that genre, of course, a 10 out of 10 in that genre is not going to be a 10 out of 10 for you, probably. Same thing with like Elden Ring. If somebody gives Elden Ring a 10, If you don't like those kinds of games, if you've never liked Elden Ring or Dark Souls or Demon Souls or Bloodborne or Sekiro, nothing's magically going to change with Elden Ring. It's the same kind of thing. It's just in a different package, reworked, and it's very good, but it's a 10 out of 10 for fans of those types of games. And often I think people will see the Metacritic score being really, really high, and they're like, oh, so it is objectively a way better game than this one, which is scored at like a 96 instead of the 97 that it achieved. And it's like, no, they are at that level for fans of that genre, for fans of those types of games. Because somebody that really likes Baldur's Gate 3 might not be that into something like Tears of the Kingdom. They might not like third-person adventure games. They just might not. I don't know why they wouldn't, because they're playing like isometric adventure RPG, narrative RPG, but like, who knows? Maybe they just don't. So sometimes the overlap isn't quite there. It's why I think like so every once in a while people will pop in and ask like, what is the best game of all time? I'm like, there isn't one. It's just like, what's my personal favorite? What would I take to a deserted island with me if I could just play that in purgatory forever? Okay, let me think. That's a different question. But to say like there's a singular best game, I just don't think there is. Yeah, well, Elden Ring did bring a lot of people into that particular genre. So people who didn't like Soulsborne ended up loving Elden Ring, so that it's possible. I would say most of that is due to the word of mouth. Like a lot of people that wouldn't normally do it, because the game was so popular, because it was everywhere, everybody was playing it. Normally they would just shut down because the perception was that Dark Souls, oh, if you're like a tryhard, if you like to just masochistically just suffer when playing a game, you want to fight a boss 50 times and beat your head against the wall, yeah, play Dark Souls. And so a lot of people were just like, I'm not interested, I'm just not going to play it. But with Elden Ring, the word of mouth was so crazy positive and it was everywhere that people gave it a try. And they probably would have liked Dark Souls 3. They probably would have liked Sekiro and those other games. They just didn't try them because the perception was different. But Elden Ring was so huge that it just seeped in. And then those people who tried it and loved it for the first time, had never tried it before, and they were converts to Elden Ring, they decided to then go and convert their friends, and it just kind of rippled through from there. Having co-op really helps too. For that kind of thing. Elden Ring, I played a lot of co-op with my old roommates from college, and Baldur's Gate 3, I'm doing a couple of campaigns with friends, and we're playing through it together, and we're having a great time. So, like, even my wife, Nikki, who isn't normally into, like, isometric games, like, she's played the Dragon Age ones, which I guess you could say are sort of isometric, so I guess maybe she is, but, like, she's just normally not into, like, super hardcore RPGs. But she's been having a great time with Baldur's Gate 3. Like, it's crazy. She's every night she's playing it. She gets, like we get Lachlan down for bed. She gets her snacks and then goes sits down, and she'll just play for like 3-4 hours. It's really funny. But that's the power of a really solid game.
I don't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons. I didn't know this game had anything to do with Dungeons and Dragons. And you know why I'm playing it? Because I like good games with a heavy focus on storytelling and bears. But anyway, it wasn't all doom and gloom from the...
Oh boy, here comes my usual hot take. I can't disagree with this more. Hold on, what are they disagreeing with? Oh, it's the same post as before. Whenever a game disrupts the industry and delights players beyond expectations, it absolutely... raises industry and genre standards regardless of the why and how. Yeah, I just think it's like it doesn't really matter what the reason is. If the perception is that the bar's been raised, it's been raised. People will hold other RPGs to the same standard as Baldur's Gate 3, whether you like it or not. You don't have to like it, but when Ubisoft or whoever else releases an RPG and it's nowhere near as deep as Baldur's Gate 3, they will be held to account. That's just, it is what it is.
Development side. Thank you, Juno Bleeze, formerly of Riot, for jumping in and echoing exactly what I'm saying here. Her quote tweet reads, I can't disagree with this one more. Whenever a game disrupts Larian's success story and ask our standards regardless of why and how. We should look at the Larian success story and ask ourselves, how are we going to make our games better and create the next games that shake up the industry? Players should and must always expect more from us, never less. Thank you. I implore AAA devs.
What a crazy take, right? We should do better than we've done before. That is my hot take. But oh man. And again, like those devs were like They were very well intentioned. They were trying to just be like, listen, guys, we don't have the budget of Larian. We don't have the staff of Larian, so we can't achieve that. And I, like, to a certain extent, no duh. Nobody's expecting an indie team to make Baldur's Gate 3 or to make a game similar to it. But when you're talking about a role-playing game and when you're talking about a priced package, yeah, you look real bad if you charge $70 for a game that has 20 hours of very light RPG gameplay. You just look bad, and we're going to hold you to account. It just is what it is. If Larian could figure out the pricing model, you should be able to figure out the pricing model. Like, it's just not that complicated. If you go, well, we spent 5 years and had 2,000 employees working on it the whole time. Okay, maybe you shouldn't have done that if you can't make it profitable selling X number of millions of copies at $70 each. Maybe you shouldn't have done that. Like, it's not my fault. Find a way to run it and run a tighter ship. I do think that there's probably a good amount of bloat at some of these companies. Like any tech company right now, it seems like there's a lot of bloat. Elon walked in, fired 80% of Twitter staff, and the website still works globally. It certainly had some tech issues when they were in the transitionary period, but it still runs just fine. As good as ever, if not better, because now they have like the really long tweets that are available. They have better video support. They're paying creators on Twitter. Like, if anything, the website's running better than ever, and it has only 20% of the staff it did, but like when he took over. So I have to wonder, and like my dad does contracting work with Microsoft and a couple of other big companies, and he was even telling me, oh yeah, no, it's well known that a lot of these companies have a ton of bloat. They will hire people just to keep them away from other studio or from other companies. And like in tech companies, Microsoft will hire AI engineers just so Google can't hire them. Even if they don't have work for the AI engineer to do at Microsoft, they just want them to not work for the competition. So they'll pay them $800,000 a year to do literally nothing just so that they aren't benefiting the competition. That's ridiculous. But that's how a lot of these companies work. And with game companies, I don't see why it would be any different. It seems to me pretty clear with like Call of Duty. You're telling me that you have 2,000 to 3,000 people working on Warzone and it launches broken constantly. Things are constantly unbalanced. It just doesn't run well at all. Like, you're telling me that you needed 2,000 people to do that? Okay, I'm watching you. I have a feeling like there's a lot of bloat. But this is also one of those things that like talking about makes you into the bad guy, because if I say, hey, I think there's a lot of bloat with some of these companies, and you're like, so you want developers to be fired? Like, no, I don't want anybody to lose their job. My question is whether they should have been hired to begin with. Like, should the company have expanded to that level to begin with? Did they actually need that?
He took my thing.